Hello, everyone. Welcome, welcome. We're so excited to have you here. Please hang tight. We're just giving people a couple of minutes to join, and the webinar will be getting started shortly. Thanks so much. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's event. We're so excited to have you here. My name is Patrika Elise, and I'll be your MC for today. The AI4 team is excited to bring to you the state of AI in insurance. We have amazing panelists for you. Just one quick housekeeping item before we get started today. Please make sure to put your questions in the Q&A box as opposed to the chat. The Q&A box makes it easier for us to organize your questions and easier for the panelists to be able to answer them. So please make sure that you're sharing those questions there and feel free to ask lots of questions. We're excited to engage with you here today. So without further ado, I'd like to bring our panelists to the virtual stage and hand it over to Dan, our moderator.
Thank you, Patrika. We're so happy to be here today. We're just gonna do some quick introductions and then we will get started in the webinar. Patrika, I always appreciate your energetic intros. So my name is Dan. I am the Senior Content Manager for AI4 events and webinars. My job is to put together all the content and make sure that we're educating everybody about our intended content. With that, I will kick it over to Bich-Thuy for her introduction and then Shivana. Just a few sentences about who you are and why you're on an AI4 insurance webinar would be helpful.
Hi, my name is Bich-Thuy Lee. I am the VP of Advanced Analytic for the US insurance industry at Afiniti. What we do is that we use behavior science AI in order to better understand human behavior so that we can do better pairing for the best outcome for both sides. Before that, I used to work at Allstate, where I work with the data scientists across all the business units. So that's include claims and agency, you name it. We've underwriting all of that in order to identify some great business use cases and then try to automate that so that a scalable solution as quickly and efficiently out into the market.
Thank you, Bich-Thuy. Shivana, would you like to give a brief introduction for the crowd?
Hello, I'm Shivana Debisaran. I am a program manager in the AI space for insurance at USAA. So currently we are doing a modernization effort that's going to take our legacy data and marry it up with new data coming in, bringing in our Guidewire system to help with that transition and building a platform for AI capabilities that's going to supplant the old AI systems that we have and allow us to do deeper dives into machine learning in order to build out our capabilities. I've worked for American Express, GE Capital, Honeywell. I've worked in several capacities, all in data, all in the data management and the artificial intelligence space, along with analytics.
All right.
I'm excited to be here.
We're excited to have you here, Shivana. Thank you so much. Patrika, if you are still with us, first question, there we go. Always ahead of the game. Okay. Warm-up question, insurance and AI, a perfect match or a breakup waiting to happen? Why don't we have Bich-Thuy kick that off? What are your initial thoughts on that?
A marriage made in heaven. If you think about insurance, it's about the business of trying to manage and mitigate risk against the unexpected so that you don't have like a financial, negative impact on it, right? And so since the dawn of time, during the merchants and during the Silk Road, it's like they're always trying to figure out like, how do you mitigate all those risks? And that, if you think about insurance, they've been doing forecasting for multiple years, for like decades now. So AI, with the advent of AI, it allowed them to be able to do it faster with deeper insights so they can better understand what are all the risks so that they can have that coverage that is needed.
Cool. Thank you very much. Shivana, what are your initial thoughts on this? Breaking up or marrying? Marrying, what do you think?
I think it's a marriage, just like Bich-Thuy said, because the capability exists that we have so much data in insurance, and AI is just the algorithms that are used in AI is just ripe to really scrape those and push those scenarios up into such a way that we can really pivot to specific scenarios as they come and be able to predict on those. And I think the volume of data alone, because when you get into the AI space and machine learning, the more data, the better. So you have all this data to start with, and you can really make some inroads into specific types of predictions that could really help your customers. So it's definitely a marriage.
I see. And just one follow-up question actually for both of you. Something this question lacked is it did not talk about a timeline, right? So you both think marriage. Are we married yet, or are we dating, so to speak? How close are we, I guess, to being in a position where we can leverage all this data? Shivana, you want to just quickly address that? I know you're in a big data management project right now.
Yeah, I think we're married because they've just, at my company, they've made that decision to go forward. And it just really opens up that space for them to really look at AI capabilities because they already have this bedrock of data. So they've already created schemas and algorithms, and they've created storage spaces in our data warehousing, and we're pushing all this stuff into Snowflake to take on that capability of these large volumes of flattened data, where you have to really roll things up at a different level in order to create sound predictive capabilities. So they've already made that investment, they've already assessed it, and they're just moving forward with it now.
I see. Bich-Thuy, any thoughts?
Well, I think it's evolving is what I wanted to say, because it's like we've gotten married, but it depends upon which insurance company you're talking about. Some are more mature than others.
Mm-hmm.
And depending upon the level of maturity, some of them has just gotten started trying to understand their marriage and what are all the data, what are all the business cases, and what are all the changes out in both the market as well as the customers and the technology that are constantly evolving all the time. Right, so they're trying to handle that, but in the meantime, for a company that is more mature, like my company Afiniti or Allstate, we've already understand. To Shivana's point, it's like we already have all the data, but now it's evolving in a sense that you now have all these unstructured data. You now come in the deep learning aspect, where you now have like the telematics from the car sensors, the home sensors, the photos, the videos that's coming in. And not only that, but you have edge computing with all the speed that's coming in at it too, that you can now do in real time, because in the past it's more of online processing, but it's really batch. It's really slow, but now you actually have real time that we can make a big difference to our customers.
I see. Very helpful. Patrika, want to bounce ahead to the next question? Okay, great. So thank you for that brief introduction from both of you. This question is about opportunities. What opportunities does AI provide when it comes to insurance? Examples, please. And this can be low-hanging fruit, more complex approaches to this. Please take it any way you would like. Shivana, would you like to begin on opportunities for AI in insurance?
So in the claims processing space, I think, that's kind of the area that I'm in right now, getting that modernized. The AI capabilities are such that we want to be able to predict on a family of 4 living in Alabama, and what are they going to be their coverage needs versus a family of 4 living in California. You've got demographic information, you've got geographic information. All those things have to factor into how we would propose a coverage package for that family, right? And then if a member gets deployed, how do you flex that pricing so that the spouse at home having to take care of the kids, having to take care of running the household? How does that pricing affect? You're going to have to change the pricing based on the deployment of the member. So these are factors that we have to fit in, the standard of living, the age of the participants, their goals in life, where they want to go, their income, all of this we have to factor in when we do the predictive capabilities of this particular example.
I see. And to clarify, AI is helpful in leveraging the ability to factor in all those disparate data points in a way that previous techniques are not, just to make sure I'm really clear on this.
Right, and the beauty of AI is it builds on itself, because you can start with that base of data, right? Let's just say you've got demographic information, you got geographic information, and then you can build on that based on that bedrock of data. So if you run a scenario based on, I want to know, how this family is doing in this geographical location versus the next, and if a member gets deployed, how does that change? And then you can say, okay, now that we've had the quoting for those two specific geographical locations for a family, then you can raise that up another level based on the fact that, okay, I have two kids that are going to go to college in the next 5 years. How does that impact what I'm going to price out when it comes to if my home gets hit with a tornado, or a hurricane? How is that going to price out based on the income, based on the likelihood of a disaster happening?
I see. Thank you very much. Bich-Thuy, where do you see the greatest opportunity for AI? What opportunities are you seeing?
AI provides us with amazing opportunity in customers' experience and improving that. And on top of the operational efficiencies that everybody heard about, and everybody know that they want to chase after, like almost every company, it's not just insurance, it's also across the industry that everybody wants customers' experience. But what does that mean exactly? So if you think about insurance, the first time the customer's interface is on, it's either the agent or the customer's rep, right? It's the agent because they have a connection with them. They have maybe a direct number. Customer's rep is through a telephone that the call-in center. So so it's everything that Shivana said about claims. But on top of that, when you go in and talk about claims, if you have using AI with deep learning unstructured data with photos, for an example, I got into a car accident and I took a picture. And if you upload it, if they immediately figure out it's a total loss without making you wait another day, within a few hours, you can suddenly get a check-in. And then you can go ahead and buy a new car and resume your life as quickly as possible, right? Or if you were in a catastrophe situations, they can use drones. You've heard about it in the news, about how they go into these devastated areas and they discover, okay, your home is pretty much wiped. We can actually issue a check so you can start rebuilding your house a lot faster, right? So those are the type of things that you find in claims. But it also, so when I talk about the call center and the intelligent routing is pretty big too, because if I were to call in and they found out like who I am, and I'm trying to figure out, like I already have an auto policy, but I'm trying to call in about another auto policy, and they discovered that I have a little, like a teenager. So if they discovered that, they'll route me to an agent who knows all about auto policies and bundling, because it's a lot cheaper for our customer to have like a bundling together, have a big discount than it is to have separate policy. And that will improve customer satisfactions and experience. That is less for the customers and better retention for us, because retention in insurance is a huge deal. It costs more to get new customers than it is to retain. So all of this provide both a win-win for both situations, especially when you want to make sure that you're pairing the customer who has certain needs to the right agent or customer representative to handle faster, right? So going back to the claims, same situation. Claims, like the faster handling time is always something that insurance companies chase after. So if you can pair that quickly and identify this is a huge problem area that might involve, litigations, might involve third parties, and all of that, it's like you would want to go in and contact all the right parties and get them involved quickly in the process so that we can settle the claims as quickly as possible and get the check out there to the right people.
Wow. Yeah, that's really thorough answer. And thank you so much. So, I mean, we're talking about a ton of different use cases in pricing,
intelligent routing.
Yeah, literally everything. Responding to customer queries, the speed,
Yeah.
the operational efficiency, everything. Personalized services you mentioned with the experience. Do either of you, either Shivana or Bich-Thuy, have you caught any wind of AI being used for fraud detection? I know that's something that a lot of people have been talking about.
Yes.
Feel free for either of you to jump in.
Absolutely.
Is that going on?
Oh yes, it's actually huge. If you think about the P&C, 10% of the loss is due to fraud. So it's a big deal. And with litigations and everything, that's one of the top costs for insurance and claims. So we are definitely looking into that to figure out, like, early detection is huge. If you can quickly identify that somebody come in to make a false claim, if we can nip that at the bud, that's great, because the further down the process, the more people that are involved, and maybe even pay out a false claim, all of that costs the insurance company a lot of money. And at the end of the day, it does roll out to all the other consumer, right? So it's better for everybody if we can detect this as early as possible. So we use AI to detect certain behavioral patterns and certain indicators that something is going wrong, and then we flag it immediately for the investigation to happen sooner than later. So the faster we can catch it, the better. And I'll let Shivana talk, because there's a lot of details that goes into that.
Well, and we at USAA, we're big on the whole compliance and security thing, right? And so, in that case, you have a customer profile that's set up, and based on that customer profile, you can understand that person's spending, where they live, the type of house they own, the type of vehicle. So jewelry fraud is a big deal, right? A lot of people will claim the loss of a diamond or an engagement ring. And so, you have to understand that as you build a customer profile and you're getting all that information, and especially like something like jewelry, you want to be able to have that platform to run your data on and run your queries on, so that you can start to mine based on the customer profile as they're calling in. Is this a legitimate claim, right? Is this a legitimate? And so it'll start to weed out, it'll start to flag it and say, okay, this person is claiming the loss of a diamond ring that's $10,000. However, they insured it for $5,000. And so what's going on here, right? What's the disconnect, right? And then you can kind of trigger law enforcement, the fraud department, to contact law enforcement to go check that out, to investigate it, based on the fact that the person misclaimed what a diamond would cost them, an engagement ring would cost them. So there's all kinds of avenues that you can kick off with AI based on a flag that says, okay, the person putting in the claim, it doesn't match the profile that we have on them. So what's the discrepancy?
I see. Very helpful. Very helpful. So of all these options, so many different use cases going on here. Let's say you had someone who, was just dipping their toes in AI use cases. Do you have a well-developed perspective on what is the greatest bang for your buck, let's say? Is there any particular thought that you have about, which of all these is the most helpful? Any thoughts on that? Feel free to either of you to jump in.
Well, I would say that in insurance, if you're talking about from a business, the biggest opportunity, it is claim. Claims would be the biggest there, because even in pricing sophistications, insurance has been working with that since claim first exist, and they have that well handled. I'm not saying that there isn't opportunity there, but claims is a huge area because of the fraud, because of all the factors, and including the sensors and everything, because we now have more data to be able to verify the information, right? Including identity theft. If I called in, it's like trying to apply for an application using somebody else's name, I could identify, it's like, is this a legitimate number tied to this address, to this person identity, a lot faster than it was before. So I would say that claims would be the number one, but at the same time, if I am an insurance company, I would definitely look at your infrastructure and how much data you have. Because one of the cool thing about AI is that, and big data that coming in, is that there's a huge amount of vendors out there that are starting to sell third-party data. So if I'm an insurance company who is a small insurance company who don't have a lot of data and history, there are a lot of company third-party data that can sell you that type of information, so that you can build that data, so that you can train it, right? So that you can train, because at the end of the day, AI modeling requires a lot of data for the training, to accuracy and everything. So that's one thing, is like, so make sure that you look to see, do you have enough data, and where can you get the data? Because you can't go in and try to solve a problem that you don't even have the data or the infrastructure supported. Such as, like, if you wanted to, like, I talk about videos and all that stuff, but that takes a lot of bandwidth as well as volume. And do you have that amount of storage and everything, right?
Yeah, very helpful. Shivana, I know you're in a big transition when it comes to data pipelines. It's a big project right now. I mean, could you also speak to the need for data and talk to how the importance of how it's organized and laid out in platforms and stuff like that?
Yeah, so I mean, I started my data career as a data architect, and we were, you talk about your online transaction processing systems turning into online analytical processing systems, which are basically your star schema in order to store a data warehouse, to build out a data warehouse so you can run your analytics. Well, now with the advent of big data, where you're flattening out that data and you're doing more of a column store search versus a row search, the capabilities of mining large amounts of data is a reality with Hadoop coming in, and then now we have Snowflake. So my company has decided to go to Snowflake just because of the maturity of our organization. There's so much data we already had, and then we're pulling that into this Snowflake environment, and also allowing an outside vendor, Guidewire, to come in and do our claims for us. And that's going to be our new transaction processing system. So at the end of the day, what we're trying to do, we're building out this pipeline where we're pulling legacy data, but we're also developing attributes that Guidewire is going to be using so that our claims people can enter that data into Guidewire. So at the end of the day, when all that data gets housed in Snowflake for us to do our analysis, we just have this larger volume of data. But how we're doing it is we're moving it from legacy applications into a more free-form environment where we can pull in that third-party data as well as marry it up with our own structured data. So the biggest bang for your buck is to get structured and unstructured to talk to each other so you can run your AI capabilities, and that gives you the large volume of data, not just within your organization, but outside of your organization. So you're bringing in other perspectives, right? When you pull in unstructured data that you're going to buy from a vendor. So you're looking at social media, you're looking at spending trends, and vacationing opportunities too. All these things kind of, some of the cool thing about AI is you can pull in all these disparate types of data elements that don't mean a whole lot, but when you start to run an algorithm that ties it together, you go, wow, this is really cool, that I can look at how someone's vacation habits, and I can tailor a claim, an insurance policy based on their vacation habits. And these are the things that AI allows you to do that you can't find with regular data platforms.
Cool. Thank you very much for that perspective. Very, very helpful. Patrika, would you like to move on to the next question? Okay. We sort of have been touching on this. Is going to be a great topic, I think. So what challenges do organizations encounter when implementing or actively using AI for insurance? Of course, examples, please. Bich-Thuy, would you like to start us off here?
Sure. One of the biggest challenges, you think about it, it's easy to say that we're trying to provide customer satisfaction experience. But again, what does that mean? In this day, modern day and age, in the past, when it comes to security and privacy information, it used to be whatever application information I provide to the company, that's all they have about me. But now that the company can go out and find out more information about me through social media and other outlets, that privacy ownership is now shifted to it's not my responsibility to keep my data private anymore. It's my company that I'm applying that to, is to make sure they secure my information, right? So that shifts. So therefore, and with that, all the rules and regulations that are out there. So the companies have to go in and make sure that the data is secured and it protects the privacy of their customers. Not just in behalf of the customers, because as soon as it's not just for rules and regulation that's constantly changing, but it's also for the customers who's demanding at this point in time to have that type of security. So that's one thing. The other thing too, but at the end of the day, if you think about it, customers experience also want multi-channel. If I want to be able to access it through my laptop, through my mobile phone, or if so that it needs to be seamless. But at the same time, if I started one process in one place, I want to finish that process, end-to-end process, in another place, and still remember where I'm at. And more importantly, if a company have multiple products, I want the company to have my information across all the product, right? So I don't want to call into auto and then have to repeat myself in home. They should be able to have that seamlessly across the board. Or, at Allstate, for an example, if I were to be a person under Encompass, I need to be able to have the same type of information at Allstate Property itself or DriveWise. So that omni-channel, multi-channel support is important, but in order to support that, you need to have the infrastructure that will integrate all those data together in order to make that happen. So data integration is important, data reliability, where the quality and security needs to be there and access needs to be there. And then last but not least, skills and experience. We need people who have the skills and experience to implement all of this.
I see. Thank you. Yeah, a lot of really great challenges there. I am curious how you go about creating a really wonderful experience across all those different channels. I mean, do you have perspective on like how companies are approaching that, how you would approach that? Any initial thoughts on that? I think it's a great thing that I wasn't thinking of.
Sure. You have to look at it from what I call a 360 point of view: technology, process, people, and data. So maybe 4 point of view. And first thing is like, you have to look at like, what is the current process? It's like, what is broken about it? Where does it stop? Where does it end? So you have to look at the overall entire process workflow. And if you notice that if it's cumbersome, it's not seamless, or if there's a break in the system, you want to fix that process. So in the process of redefining that business process to make it seamless, you then have to peel down the onion and say, okay, how do I make that happen? So that's where the technology comes in, right? What are the systems that needs to be able to talk to each other? Or is this system that needs to be replaced because it doesn't need to do with the capability that it needs to do? And then once you peel off the systems, meaning application software and all of that, then you look at the data. The data are not flowing through. It's cumbersome and all. So you want to look at all of that together. But at the end of the day, you want to look about how does it really impact people and the users who are using this in order to do it. Because I always like to say that just because you can doesn't mean you should. And a lot of times, technology-wise, we can do powerful things, but just because we can doesn't mean we should. Because we can go into people's mobile phone and find out privacy information about them doesn't mean we should, right? Because that's an invasion of privacy. Or we have like an IP within our company. We can put a model out on the mobile phone in order to do the scoring, in order to get the outcome that we wanted to. But maybe we don't want to have that model out on the mobile phone because it's intellectual property. That is too risky for the business, so we shouldn't. So you really need to look at what problem it is you're trying to solve, and do you have all of the infrastructures and technical capabilities to solve it? And then how is it going to impact? How wide and how deep is it going to impact? Because the unexpected consequences is what you want to avoid.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for that perspective. Shivana, would you like to weigh in on challenges associated with using AI, implementing AI, anything related?
Well, I think the digital capability is the biggest piece, like Bich-Thuy was saying, because you have mobile, you have computers, you have all these other avenues. So it's really getting all these different channels to talk to each other, and with the data associated with as it's coming across. You're right. If I want to file a claim in auto, but I end up in home, I don't want to have to repeat myself. So it's really how the digital I like to say the digital foundation really supports the data about a claim, so to speak, or even any kind of underwriting capabilities as well. So I think that's the biggest challenge because AI, it kind of has to have a base to land on in order to build the capability, like in Snowflake. But if you're trying to marry up different types of avenues to pull that data in, that's trying to pull it in from different sources and marry it up in the back end in order to run the AI capability. So that's really the challenge for us.
Yeah, very interesting to hear that. You both said one great challenge that, of course, comes to mind is neither of you said, oh, wow, it's really hard to build AI, to create algorithms. You both talk about the infrastructure upon which AI rests, which I think is very significant. One thing I do want to ask you both about is questions of bias, something that's getting a lot of attention right now. I'm curious what your perspective on how AI what it is, how it works, and mostly really how you can avoid it. And, do you have any perspective on that? What would you say? Either of you, please.
So the bias is always going to be there. It's part of the building of the AI capability. But at the same time, I'm hoping as the algorithms are running and you're analyzing the data that's coming from it, you can kind of see a bias in there and you can kind of call it out. It depends on, the direction that you want it. Everyone, if I say something to you, Daniel, you're going to have a bias about it, right? It's really hard to be objective, right? So it's really a sense of, if the bias is there, you have to look at the capability within the algorithm itself and what is pointing to that bias, right? And then you have to come back and say, I'm gonna have to decompose those results and figure out, okay, is that a proper bias that's coming out of this algorithm, right? And if it is, then I need to tweak it, or I need to just go with it and factor in other capabilities in order to make that algorithm more functional.
I see. So in other words, you need human eyes on the algorithms at all times to ensure that bias does not get out of hand, is what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, as much as I love this capability of AI, I do believe that we do have to have a human element in there, because there is that risk that we're going to be in T4, in a Terminator type of situation. I'm just kidding, but you know what I'm saying? You have to have that human element in there.
This just in, folks. T4. Just kidding. Okay, Bich-Thuy, what is your perspective on bias? Have you thought about the same sort of things? Yeah, what would you say?
Oh my gosh, we've talked about it forever, because I remember talking to one of my friends who is a music composer, and we now have artificial intelligence that will allow you to generate music, for an example. And the industry is actually, the music industry are generating music using AI. So when does it become creative and when it's not? And especially if the music are being generated based upon the population's sentiments, like, is that the death of creativity? Because then that means that they're just, it's just a feedback loop on this stuff. It's always playing something that they think that the population wants to hear, and death goes to creativity. But bias in general, we have situations where you've heard about in the news where you're doing like resume, they're scanning the resume, trying to assess like what's the best candidate and everything. To discover anybody with the name of John would be the best candidate, right? And you've heard of some of those funny things. Or they talk about like looking at the chat box and using AI to discover, the next thing you know, having that conversational piece, they become very racist, very, well, I'm not going to mention some of the other things, but it reflects the human populations and all that. So what I'm trying to say is this: it's like you have to be very, very conscious of the models that you're picking and the type of data that you're doing, the parameters and everything, to make sure that you understand the data that's coming in and what's coming out of it. Or more importantly, you have to understand what is the goals and objective of the problem that you're trying to solve. And then what are all the levers that when you push it, like, is it giving this false information, and then how you detect it early on so that you can go in and modify and fix it. So it's very, so to Shivana's point, right now, I don't think that we can have no human interactions whatsoever when it comes to something that requires matters that are less objective, right? If you're looking outside, is it sunny or not? Depending upon where you are, you can say based upon fact that this is now sunny. But if I happen to be halfway across the world, it's not sunny because it's raining there. So, but that's something that that by facts you can. But things that are more subjective, meaning the human element, the human behavior side of things, to Shivana's point, I think we still need to have a lot go from human perspective. And with that, I think that we need to own the models that we're building, the data's coming in and what that data output looks like, and continue to tweak and optimize as we go along.
I see. Thank you for that perspective. You're really interesting. Patrika, would you like to jump to the next topic? Okay, great. Very relevant. Hopefully we're moving forward in a positive way, but has COVID-19 changed anything about insurance? If so, does AI factor in anywhere? Very curious about your thoughts on both of these. Doesn't matter what order we go in. Shivana, would you like to share your perspective first on COVID?
Sure. So, you know, like what she was saying about when she got into an accident and she had to take a picture. You know, I think that's just great. It's great in the sense that, you know, I don't have to wait an adjuster to come out and take pictures and look at it, right? You have the capability now, you can take a picture, and based on the type of damage, the check can be cut right away. So I think that's just because of COVID, that's a great example, because, you know, we wanted to limit people's interaction with each other based on the virus, right? And you know, so COVID kind of, in my case, the working from home option, right? And now everyone's working from home. So, you know, in an AI space, we can still interact in such a way the data can still perform and be used in order to create those algorithms without having to have close contact with people. I think one of the things that's going to come out of COVID is that we really don't need all this office space, you know, because people have found a way to work remotely that works. Now, I'm not saying that you shouldn't have human interaction, but I'm saying that at the end of the day, data is data, and you can still have that capability to load a database or to perform algorithms on a star schema, or, you know, into a cloud environment that will allow you to still build out that AI capability. So long and short of it, I don't think it really affects the AI capabilities, because you're still creating algorithms, whether you're doing it in a room or with a bunch of people. You can still collaborate with those people on a Zoom session.
I see. Yeah, thank you for that perspective. Bich-Thuy, agree or disagree? And just any thoughts you have on COVID and its impact on AI capabilities within insurance?
I think that COVID has a huge impact on AI, because COVID forces people to stay at home and forces people, and for those who doesn't like online shopping, who doesn't like to use mobile phone, who doesn't, or executives and managers who don't like their workers to work from home, they prefer them in the office, right? So in other words, what I'm saying that if you want to look at glass half full, and I know that COVID is thinking half glass full is kind of, seems to be counterintuitive, but it forces people to really think outside the box and be open to new solutions. Because how many times in the past have we tried to introduce new technology and new capabilities, and we always have resistance from customers who don't understand, who don't trust it and everything. But because of COVID, they are now open to, because they're desperate. They have to be able to go shopping online for groceries. I would never go shop online for grocery. Now I'm looking at it because of health concerns, right? So they open it up for you. And because of that, depending upon which statistic you look at, it actually says that COVID actually forces companies from anywhere from 65 to 85% into the digital technology, right? So what I'm trying to say, it accelerates digital technology and AI because of that. And now in the past, if I didn't trust AI in the past to like telematics to understand my driving behavior, now I have to, because in order to use the application, it'll be able to warn me about like dangerous hazard road in the front of me. It tells me about like certain road conditions that are being blocked or whatever the case may be. It's like you're much more open to it because you're used to it, and then you're more willing to share that data. And the more data you share with the companies and all these vendors, the more data the company have to learn and understand about you to provide you with better services, right? So those are type of things that I think that really impact AI. And you know what? You can go up there and say COVID, impact of insurance and all that, and you'll find a whole bunch of information. But I think the key thing, in my opinion, is that when it comes to insurance, it's the unintended consequences that we need to look at. And to me, here are some of the unintended consequences that, based upon my personal observation, so take it as it is. We are now much more open to move away from living in a location that we would like to live in instead of living close to where we work. So that's where you hear about the real estate, in real estate, like people are moving to closer to the beach, closer to the mountain, like in rural area. They're no longer, like, the urban landscape has changed because of that. So, and how does that impact insurance? Well, now you have, like, it impact traffic patterns, which then impact all the risk for cars, which impact where the homes are at, right? So it does impact the insurance a lot, just by the fact that people are moving away from certain areas into other areas that they normally wouldn't have to, so the population dispersed. Second is that health reasons why. Like, there are some arguments about, like, how you're now more home-based, so you don't move around as much, so it's going to impact your health. So their health insurance. But then on the other hand, people are much more conscious about it too, so they're much more invested into into certain lifestyles and trying to pick those things up too. So that is actually going to be an interesting area to see, because some people are just going to be staying more healthy and eating more healthy, and then others, because of COVID and the opening of the eyes, and others are actually more sedentary, like me. As soon as I become home based, next thing I know, I'm sitting on the same chair for 12 hours and hardly ever move. When I got up, I can barely move and get up, which is really bad. So now I have a watch that tells and remind me, like, every hour, it's like, get up and move around. Like, literally, that's a change in habit that I've never had to worry about before. So those are, like, the two top things that we have to think about, like the impact of people's behavioral patterns, especially when it comes to health. And then the other one is, like, being more remote. Where do they shop and buy things? Because now you're much more dispersed instead of in the urban area.
Wow. Yeah. Very interesting perspective. Very interesting to hear about the consumer acceptance of AI changing, being open to more digital, especially as well. I think that must be true, considering the acceleration that we've seen. Really cool. Patrika, do you want to bounce ahead to the next question? We also have some questions I'm seeing coming on the chat. Thank you, everyone, for doing that. We will get to them towards the end. Okay, so where do you see the future of insurance headed over the next 5 years? A very interesting question. Feel free to mention anything that comes to mind. Shivana, would you like to kick this one off on the future of insurance?
I like what Bich-Thuy had to say about now, because of COVID, it's kind of opened the eyes of people, and it's changed being located close to work versus located where you want to live. So if you look at, your urban picture is different now, right? Because people aren't really moving to the cities anymore because of the internet, because of the digital capabilities that we have now. I would see our insurance patterns changing too, and the requirements for coverage changing based on the fact that you don't have that population density in the cities that you're not going to have anymore. People are more dispersed, so you would have more insurance policies written for land and home versus apartments. So I see that changing a lot, and AI would be able to predict basically, which areas of the country would be best to live in, given your type of job, given the fact that you used to commute. My commute, I started at USAA in September of 2019, and my commute was an hour and a half each way. And it was ridiculous, right? And then they had these planning sessions once a quarter. Everyone had to be in San Antonio to do these planning sessions. And now with COVID, we did it remotely. And now it's been so successful, there's no need for everyone to be in San Antonio every quarter. And now there's basically, well, if we get it together in San Antonio, we're just going to have lunch and just have a celebration, so it's just the mindset is different now, because, we just get locked into these specific ways of working. And it took COVID for us to, and that's one of the positive things, although COVID was extremely negative, but it was one of the positive things that came out is that you don't have to be co-located in offices to do your work. So then as you talk about how that's going to affect insurance, going back to the fact that you won't have to be covering urban areas as much as you would have to be covering where people are located.
Right. Yeah, thank you for your perspective. Bich-Thuy, any thoughts on the future of insurance before we jump into Q&A?
It's an interesting question, because you can look at it from multifaceted, right? And at the end of the day, insurance is a business. to go and mitigate the risk against the unexpected. And that unexpected could be anything from, I mean, like several years ago, I heard about a superstar or somebody who, I forgot who it was, who insured against her leg, $1 million on her famous leg, right? And so it can really literally be anything. And the reasons why I say that is because who are the customers? The customers are all the policyholders, and then the other dependencies are the technologies that are changing in order to meet it. So the customers who are changing are much more demanding. They now live lifestyles, especially with COVID, that are changing and it's still evolving, and we don't know what it looks like. So their whole, I mean, like insurance is not just like a point in time, it's an entire customer life journey. And the customer lifetime value, because of that changes along with every single, marriage and child and location, relocations, and everything that changes all the time, and the way they live, the way they behaved. So that's one thing that has changed in the demands on it. And then the other one is technology that is constantly changing. So the reasons why I'm saying this is that if I step back and I think about where the customers are heading, as well as where the technology is heading, one of the biggest things is that we have 5G just rolled out, 6G, they're already working on 6G that's coming in. And the TPU, the GPU that's required for deep learning that is needed, we now are coming out with the TPU that's coming out with NVIDIA and Google. Google went first and NVIDIA second. And with the TPU, the tensor processing unit, and the edge computing at the edge allows you to, now what that means, if you tie it all together, more sensors, IoT, edge computing with TPU processing, and a faster network of 6G. You basically have the capability of doing virtual reality on your phone or wherever you're located. And if that's the case, could you imagine the future by having that type of technology? You don't have to have somebody, an adjuster come in or somebody examining the car. They can just be virtual and then just go in and, tell your phone to go in and scan around. They'll be able to assess the situation in 3D, right? Or they can go in and with pricing sophistication, now I can go in and, this month I'm going to be traveling to here, which is more risky. So I'll adjust the premium accordingly. But now that I'm back home again, I don't need as much because I'm living now in a farm area where I really love to live instead of working where the client is at, where it's much more traffic area. So now you can lower my premium, right? So you might be able to actually adjust, adjust your premium and pricings and all of that accordingly, right? So there's so much opportunity with just those technology alone. And the reasons why I'm saying this is because I can sit here with those changes in technology, I can spin up so many different areas of opportunities out there. So what I'm trying to say is that with this coming of technology, you have more mobility and a better way to process that, all those algorithm, all those modelings and everything that requires a lot of processing power there with the amount of data that makes it possible. Okay.
I see. Thank you for that perspective. A lot of different changes going on, not the least of which is that we can all become farmers now, which I'm personally very excited about. One question we have. Okay, so we talked a little bit about bias earlier. Something that, of course, people are interested in is privacy. Shivana, you had one question about that. So one question is, are there systems in place in the insurance industry, whether it be inside the companies, outside, that act as buffers from behavior that might be viewed in some way as unethical? Are there systems, processes, what's going on to make sure that we're not have an extremely biased algorithm or violating some sort of privacy issue in our collection of data? And what does that look like? Or are we working towards that? Shivana, would you like to get going on that, and then Bich-Thuy?
Yeah, so we have the company makes it mandatory for its employees to take certain courses that speak to compliance, right? Privacy, fraud detection. There's quite a few, FINRA, all these things we have to review as employees, and we are told to look for specific signs. So when I was in the bank side of USAA, if a customer comes in and they cash a check for $10,000 and they ask for $100 bills after they cash that check, when they don't have the history of doing that, that would set off a flag where you would have to talk to a compliance person and say, this is unusual activity for this customer. So there are certain, when we build a know your customer profiles of our customer, basically, if there's a difference in how that customer behaves, it kind of gets flagged in our system, or by someone that's familiar with the protocols. So that's one of the ways that the company is, they try to balance it. We also have very strict privacy laws, compliance laws that we have to follow, not sharing the data of a customer on a need to know basis only, and it's only specifically for your set of customers that you know the information. But certain things like, social security and all that, that's never shared, right? Because that's restricted data. So, and there's strict protocols against that information getting out. So that's how we protect. And Bich-Thuy, you talked about, we have all these sensors, and we'll be able to do this 3D type of simulation and all that. But then you also have to balance that with the customer giving approval to do it, right? Because they have to know what that information is being used for. They have to know how it's being shared, right? Because I wouldn't want someone knowing my information, right? How did you get that information, right? So someone asked me in the chat about the vacation stuff. We don't store that information. It was more like a use case scenario, if you will. You're looking at patterns. So I think that's the balance you have to have, where the customer has to agree, or you just don't collect that data. You have to have that right balance.
Cool. Yeah. So a lot of different things going on. Bich-Thuy, how do we prevent the misuse of AI or any related area in insurance? What's going on?
So, well, first, I think one of the questions, like, are there any software products out there? Not that I'm aware of, but that doesn't mean that there isn't one out there or it's not being built. I know that some of the companies are building it in-house, or customized building it house. To Shivana's point, is like there are yearly, annually compliance education and training that we all have to take. And one of the ones that I actually personally love is the unbiased, is the unconscious bias training, which I absolutely love, because we're all aware of the more apparent open ones, but there are sometimes like the unconscious bias where you're not even aware, like the assumptions, for an example, that somebody who's quiet, doesn't speak up, is shy, for an example. But maybe in reality, he or she's not shy. He or she might be actually the personality type where they want to think first before they talk, right? And so those are type of unconscious bias that we need to be aware of. So how do we prevent from doing that? Aside from the training and the compliance, there's always the traditional internal audits that we do. So there's always the rules and, the federal rules and regulations audits that you do, but there's also the internal, the company per company. Some companies that's more personal internal audits than others that they do. And last but not least, my favorite is that I also try to automate that and put that in the system. So if you, like for an example, like if we detect that this is privacy information, then we automatically strip it out or mask it, right? So that's one thing we do. Or if we know that this type of information, because I think, it's one thing, you can't have both. You can't say that you're not allowed to go in and listen in to my conversation, but then expect to have that perfect voice recognitions, right? That interprets what I'm saying, because we need to have data in order to train. So if we cannot listen in order to train, then we can't do it. However, Shivana made a very good point. Like, you cannot save that data. You can only save it, you can only store it for the purpose of training it, but you cannot go in and store it for any other purposes at all. And one of the reasons one of the latest methods that came out, that just came out in the past few years, is federated learning. I love federated learning because that allows you to put the model on the device itself, and it learns from your voices and everything, and it aggregates it all, and it just sends only the data, not any of the privacy information, but send the valid information back, that what it learned back to the company, what it scores back to the company. So that will also protect the person's private, the employee's privacy, but at the same time be able to learn and train the models to be better, more accurate, right? So those are some of the techniques. So my point is, if we can automate and use some of these technology, like in AI, machine learning, deep learning, then you can actually prevent misinterpretation. Sometimes it's not even malicious, it's forgetfulness, right? I mean, like how many times do you like, okay, you need to do version control, you need to store these data, or you forgot to delete the data, right? Or I don't remember where I got the data from, data lineage situation. So all of that, if you automate it, luckily, if you do it right, then the users don't have to think about it, and it meet compliance, and then we can easily go in and delete the data after 7, 5 years, or whatever the mark is.
I see. Thank you for that perspective. Just a quick last question, and then we'll turn it over to Patrika. So this is an implementation-oriented question, right? So Bich-Thuy, you were talking about, these amazing different algorithms that can be used in the claims process, for example. So the question is, how do you balance best-in-class technology and really state-of-the-art models, let's say, and state-of-the-art technology versus realistic, impactful deliverables to customers, more of an outcome-oriented approach, like simplicity versus complexity in a way, right? And how do we get it done, have a good business outcome, but also use the fancy technology? Or how do you weigh that, at least? What would you say?
You know what? I am laughing because at the end of the day, it reminds me of what my professor once asked us. I'm a computer engineer. That's how I started out. And my professor asked all of us students, it's like, what is better, the best solution or the right solution? Mm-hmm. And the majority of us raise our hand when it comes to the best solution, including myself. So I'll freely admit it, I was one of the idiots. I raised my hands for like being one of the best solution. And he said, you know what? With that, all of you just went out of business, because the right solution is the one that will get you to the market faster than your competitor. So what's the good of finding the best solution if you're already out of business? So to answer the question is this: figure out first, what is the problem you're trying to solve? What is the goal and objective, right? And do the business case on it. And what is the expected outcome? Once you figure that out, then you balance it out with the cost analysis and everything. So in other words, it's like there's always a balance depending upon your technology maturity and everything, because if you go in and use the latest, greatest technology, but it ended up taking too long, costing too much, or too much, headwind that you had to go into, that is not going to help you solve you. Now, after saying that, I sat down in a happy hour with a bunch of data scientists, and we talked about it. There are times when sometimes the data gets to be too complex and sophisticated that it actually becomes less accurate. And I'm not going to go into more detail. So what I'm trying to say is there's actually elegant the solution of less complex solution that will allow you to get the type of accuracy that you need. So there is a balance between too simple and too complex.
I see. Shivana, agree or disagree? What would you say?
I think it goes back to the business case. You always have to, go back to what are you trying to solve? What edge are you trying to bring to your customers, right? And I have this great story. When I was at Honeywell, and the data science thing had taken off and all the algorithm stuff, and they just kind of came back and say, hey, guess what? Our data scientists are able to predict the buying habits of a customer on Amazon based on the type of coasters that they use under their furniture. And it was like, wow, that's great. And I was like, but how does that help Honeywell? Does it get you to buy an engine? Does it get you to create landing gears? Did it get you to do electronic cockpits? No. So we have all this capability, but it goes back to how useful it is. And that's why you have to have that strong business case that says, yeah, okay, fine. That's a research and development thing. That's great, but that's not in our shop. Our shop is here to solve real business, bring real value to our customers. And how do we do that? So I've had a lot of programming experience and system design experience, and you get a lot of people that are very, very sharp. But for me, the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line. So I'm not going to over-engineer stuff or subscribe to over-engineering things or building something that doesn't meet their business case and the requirements.
I see. Thank you very much. Wonderful panel. Patrika, I think we're out of time. Are you still with us? Maybe she's not.
No, I'm right here. Sorry, video takes a second to start up, but thank you. Yes, this has been absolutely wonderful. And I can hear this audience giving you a huge virtual round of applause.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much to Bich-Thuy and Shivana for your content today. And a special thank you to Dan for moderating. This has been awesome. So to the audience also, thank you for joining us. We appreciate you sharing with us and asking questions. This has been an awesome discussion. So we look forward to seeing you at the next event. But for now, have a wonderful day and we'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Take care.